Hi, Jim here, and you're listening to the Honest Filmmaker podcast. This week, my guest is director Ian Diaz. So Ian's career path was very similar to me in that his first few feature films were shot on actual film on celluloid, so it was really interesting to hear about that, how those films came together, the other projects he's worked on since, and his new web series on YouTube called Rebecca Gold. Enjoy. So talk to me a little bit about how you got into filmmaking.
The reason why I want to be a filmmaker is because of Steven Spielberg. He made me unemployed for 5 years, which is nice. I saw a film called Star Wars, and I was convinced I wanted to do special effects. And then that very same year, I saw Close Encounters, and there's a scene in the film that made me shout in my head. Then I realized it wasn't about the visuals or the model making. It was more or less about the writing and the direction. And so I kind of investigated Spielberg. At the time, it was hard because all you had was magazines and stuff like that. There was no internet, there was no mobile phones. And then the more I got to know what he did, the more I wanted to do it. And it's because of him I became a filmmaker. So how I got started was I tried to get into production companies, but the door was always closed for some reason. It was very hard in those days to actually get to connect to people. I'm working class, I'm not middle class, I'm not upper class, so it was even harder for me. And I was a man of color, and it was even harder in those days. And so basically, I joined a post-production company. It was around the time when MTV started, then Breakfast TV started. And so there was this company called M2, and they were linked with a company called Tiger Vision. And I thought, okay, well, if I join M2 as a runner, then maybe I can squeeze my way into production, which is Tiger Vision. So I started as a runner, and they realized I could draw, and they were like, "Oh, Ian, do you want to go into the graphics department?" And I was like, "Okay, it's got to be better than running." So I joined the graphics department and ended up working on a thing called the Quantel paint box, which is, I don't know if you know that.
No,
Visual
no,
effects visual effects are far more easy to do now than it was in those days. They had this thing called the paint box, the Harry and the Harriet, and then they had this thing called the Southern Machine. I can't even remember what it was called now. And I ended up doing titles for Top of the Pops and football, and also a lot of sell-through VHSs, because I don't know how young you are, but in the old days, they used to sell VHSs and used to be sell-through things like, so they used to get, like, for instance, I did one called The Best of Mr. Bean. So basically it was all the Mr. Bean episodes on VHS, but I had to do the menu, which was like the menu where it's like stars and stuff. I had to design that for Mr. Bean and other stuff as well, like Paul McKenna Stop Smoking stuff. I don't know if you're too young to remember that stuff. I used to do stuff like that. And in the end, I was really making a lot of money. And then one day just sat there in the studio and realized this is not what I want to do. So I quit my well-paid job and became unemployed for a very long time. I tried to get freelance work as a graphics artist, but I couldn't get it. And then one day I was sitting with my friend, and my friend said, "Oh, we have to make a movie," because at the time there was independent films was the thing that the studios are looking for. So basically, me and my friend were sitting there, and we would like, we're poor, how do we find money to make a movie? And again, I say in those days, there was no such thing as the internet. There was basically a phone.
Yeah.
So we decided, okay, we'll put an advert in a newspaper, like Guardian or something. Then we discovered that it cost £1,000 to put an advert in a newspaper. So we couldn't afford it. But we did find one newspaper, one magazine that was free, which was eBay. No, it was like eBay, but it was Loot. It was a magazine called Loot.
Yeah, I remember Loot.
So we put an advert in saying, if you have no experience, you want to make a feature film, contact phone this number. And literally the phone didn't stop ringing one weekend. And this is how we sold it, basically. Said, you can give us £1,000 and you can give the BBC £1,000 and learn nothing. Or you can give us £1,000 and get thrown in a deep end and learn that way. So to cut long story short, 14 people said yes. So we raised £14,000 and we shot our film on Super 16 in 2 weeks. And that's how I got started, basically,
Wow.
as a filmmaker. which is madness. It was. I said this in another podcast. It was the hardest thing I've ever did in my entire life. It was ridiculous. I knew what I was doing, but it was the first time because I made shorts, but it was the first time I was making a feature film. And a feature film is a different animal to making shorts. I tell you, it was really bad. We'd start shooting at 9:30, finish at 1:00 in the morning, sometimes 4, then getting up at 9 again and shooting. And also film. I don't know if you know. You look really young.
I've shot on film. I'm not as young as I look. My first film was on 16, and it's one of the things I try and explain. I think it's difficult to understand unless you've done it. How brutal it is shooting on film. It's
everybody.
Tough.
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead. Right. Are you frozen? Hello.
Oh, I'm back.
Yeah, because nobody realizes that you have to really know. Everything has to be organized before you even turn. The camera turns. Like, so this is how it goes. You go action, you shoot one take, then you have to open the lens, you have to open the gate, then you have to check to see if there's any hair in the gate. And if the cameraman says there's no hair in the gate, then you carry on. So that was it was kind of really hard. As I said, we were only going 2 takes tops.
Mm.
Now, so everyone had to know their lines. Everyone had to know where they were standing, their marks on the ground. The cameraman knew how to focus at this point. Do you know what I mean? It was a very different type of filmmaking compared to the digital thing that we have today. But I learned so much. I learned a hell of a lot when I was making that film. So yeah, that's how I got started. My first film was called The Killing Zone. We shot that for £14,000. We sold it. And that's what really got me started in the independent sector. Mm.
So a few things I take away from that. So yeah, definitely the film thing, and I don't know if they do it at universities now, but I think making even a short film on film is a really valuable exercise in learning that discipline of which you have to have when you haven't got a lot of money. You've just got to, like you say, 2 takes. That's all you've got. There's no fighting about. There's no leaving the camera rolling. And then not only that, the bit I used to hate was because we did one on a similar sort of budget level, first one out of university, and the bit I'd hate is changing the film in the bag.
Oh.
And, when you get a flash can and that whole, that 8 minutes, whatever you've shot is just gone. And you would all be kind of on tenterhooks waiting for, it's all fine. And then you'd have the other bit that used to just give me the shits was you send it off and you don't see it, do you? There's no. I mean, unless you can get a little monitor to see what you're filming, but you don't know what that's going to look like until like maybe a day later, maybe a week later, depending on how fast you get your brushes back. And that's always, I remember that, sitting down with the DOP and we all watch those rushes. I don't know about you, but as they were silent, non-sync, and you're just sat there watching them, praying there's nothing, that's gone tits up in those shots that you haven't realised on the day. Oh, it's making me feel anxious now.
The thing is, though, we didn't, when we shot The Killing Zone, we were just crossing our fingers, and we didn't have time to sit down and look at the rushes. When we saw the rushes was when we finished it all, and when we were in the suite, and then they played the rushes, and we were like, "Oh, that looks all right." Do you know what I mean? It was, and also changing the mag in the bag and stuff like that was pretty scary as well. Because if you don't lock that bag off and a bit of light goes in there, everything is gone. Everything is gone. And it was the hardest thing I ever did in my entire life, and I kid you not when I say that. It was incredibly hard. It was because I never went to film school. I never learned. All the stuff that I learned was watching movies and reading behind the scenes stuff. There was Cinefex in those days. I don't know if you know that magazine, Cinefex, Starburst, Starlog, and you kind of learned from there. And I remember I got into art school, and I was so happy that I got in, and I went to my dad. I got into art school, Dad. This is what we have to, get and stuff like that. My dad said, "You ain't going. We can't afford it." And that was the end of the conversation. Do you know what I mean? So that was the kind of state that I was in. And it's really funny because when I look at YouTube and I see these people teaching filmmaking, and they're like, oh yeah, so we went out in the forest and we shot this. you know, and we had these guns and stuff. You try doing that in England, especially if you live in a council flat. Do you know what I mean? There's the only place around where I live is Battersea Park. And you go in there with a plastic gun, SO19 is going to be, you know, pointing their guns at you. Do you know what I mean? So in America, it's kind of easier to shoot things with plastic guns and stuff like that. But in England, everything's restricted. Even I shot something recently, and I wanted to shoot just across my way where I live. I still live in a council flat. And the Wandsworth Council's going, no, you can't do that. I'm like, why? There's no one there. No, you can't. Do you know what I mean? So there's all these restrictions when you're shooting stuff, especially where I live. You know what I mean? So it's always been rough to make films around where I live and around, you know what I mean? Because when you don't have any money.
So I'm assuming, did you go to Cannes, or how did you sell your first film?
Yeah.
Did you just contact people?
So basically, we shot the film, we edited it. Oh, let me tell you this little story. Do you know Chris Jones?
Yeah.
Chris Jones, the guy who wrote that book. That book was our lifesaver. We read the book and we're like, okay,
us too. That was
yeah. Because no internet.
Filmmakers
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
No internet. Anyway, so my friend Julian said, let's go and see Chris Jones and talk to him and see what he thinks. So we went up there. We rang him because those days you can ring people, and he said, "Oh yeah, come up." So we came up. We sat down with him. We told him what we were going to do, right? So we said to him, "Look, we got £14,000. We're going to shoot this film in 2 weeks. What do you think?" Chris said to us, "Don't do it." he said, "Don't do it." He goes, "You won't complete it. Let me tell you, it's gonna be hard." And we go, "Okay." So me and Julian left, and I said, "Julian, what do you reckon?" And Julian said, "Screw him. Let's do it." So we did it. Yeah, we did it anyway. But the thing is, though, if I knew what I knew then, I would never have attempted it. It was just that we were younger and we had more spunk in us. You know, we had more energy. You know, I could not do that today. I could not do the way we shot that film was absolute madness. The way we shot it. And you know what? After we shot it and it was all put together, and we were really happy with it. We had it on, I think it was Digibeta in the end. It got dumped onto Digibeta, and that's the only copy we had. I still got it actually somewhere. And we went to Cannes with it, right? So, because in those days, Cannes would give you a venue, whether it be a small cinema or whatever, or a little place to show your film, project your film, because it was just projected. And we went to Cannes, and we were just talking to everybody saying, you know, we're showing our film. People said, they'll come. And then we turned up, and it was one person at the back and two people in the front, and me and Julian in the middle. And we were like, we're never going to sell this film. And it played. And the people that were there, they liked it. So when we were leaving, this guy comes running out. He goes, he sounded like a Barrow guy. He was like, "Oh, oi, oi, oi. Did you guys make this film?" And we're like, "Yeah, we made this film." And he goes, "Oh, I want to buy it." I'm like, yeah. And so we kept walking, and he kept following us, saying, "I'll give you this, I'll give you this, I'll give you this." By the end, by the time we reached the end of the pavement, he said, "I'll give you this," and it was like more than what it cost. And we just said yes, because we were so skint. We didn't have a penny. We were in Cannes and we didn't have any money at all. You know, we had to buy McDonald's. You know, we were just running out of money. And he said, "He'll give you this." And we said, okay. But we undersold it because, quite frankly, Killing Zone's a very good movie. And we should have waited a bit because in those days, it was all about independent films. We were in Cannes when Blair Witch was screening. And I think one of Kevin Smith's films, we were up against one of Kevin Smith's films for the LA, New York. We couldn't even afford to go. And then they rang us and they said, "Are you coming to the thing?" And we said, "We can't afford it." And they said, "Okay." And the next call we got is that you won. And we was like, "Oh, okay, thanks." So that's basically how I got started, really. Yeah.
That's a very similar story to me, including all the Cannes stuff. And it's I love Cannes. I haven't been for a while, but I do remember that kind of golden age where there was a lot less stuff there.
Yes.
And you could actually talk to people. People would offer you deals, and and I've done the eating the McDonald's, and we stayed in a campsite. My first year, I spent in a tent, 2-man tent with the other co-director. I think on the second day, he was eating breakfast and he spilt milk in the tent. So for the rest of Cannes, the tent stank because you know how hot it gets over there.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
milk
Yeah.
heated up, the tent stank, and you
Yeah.
just feel hopeless. But yeah, those were good days.
We teamed up with a couple of people that was going there. We asked them where they were staying, and they
Mhm.
said here. And we said to them, "You don't mind if we crash there as well?" And they agreed. So we crashed. We crashed.
Oh, that would have been good.
Yeah, there. Yeah. So yeah, it's quite interesting. Yeah.
So going back to where you started, Spielberg,
Yeah.
Star Wars, Close Encounters. So your first film wasn't a science fiction, though, was it? Is that right? It's just
No,
like a
no,
kind of thrillery thing. So have you done a science fiction?
no,
No.
no,
So
no,
what's
not
going
at
on?
all.
Why is that?
No, what fascinated me was, okay, there's a scene in Close Encounters, right? When Richard Dreyfuss is on the phone to his wife and the TV's playing in the background. And then you see the Devil's Tower. And when I was watching the film, in my head, I was screaming, "Look at the TV, you idiot. Look at the TV." And when I came out the cinema, I was like, how the hell did that film affect me that way? And then I realized that it's about the writing and it's about the way Spielberg directs. And then I started investigating how scripts were put together and how and looking at Spielberg's films and stuff like that. You know, like I'll give you another example. I've said this in another podcast as well. Do you know when you were young and you're watching TV and you see a soap opera like Crossroads or something, or Dallas, not Dallas, the British, like a Casualty, and then you see a movie on TV, and then I remember I was talking to my dad and I was saying, "You can tell, Dad, that that's not shot in film," and my dad was like, "How can you tell?" And I said, "It's obvious. You couldn't explain it though, but you know instinctively that it's different." And I always say to people, if you were like that when you were young, it's obvious that you have talent in art, because you can see these things that people can't see. And that was one of the things that drove me, that I could see things that people couldn't see, or how to do stuff and stuff like that. Once you've got the spark, I call it the spark, you can put your hands to anything really when it comes to artistic things. I could draw. I know what music creates an emotional bond when I'm watching films and stuff like that. I know what instrument does that. And other examples as well, like, you know, you can tell when something's shot on video, or you can tell when something's shot on film. You can tell when a scene is very well directed, but you couldn't explain it at the time. You can tell that Spielberg had this thing where, you know, like for instance, I only learned this when I was in my 20s, when I was investigating a sequence in Jaws where they all get onto the boat, you know, all three of them, and they drive off, and then they have this shot in Quint's house where there's the window and you see the teeth and you see the boat driving into the distance. And so what Spielberg was saying was they riding into danger just by showing you that shot. And I got to learn that that visual language that films actually give you when you're when you're watching movies. And when I was younger, I noticed it, but I couldn't explain what it was. And as I read and as I investigated, I suddenly realized that directing is not about talking to the actors. It's not about making sure the camera's pointed in the right direction. It's not about how fast you can shoot it. Well, it is to a certain extent.
Can be, yeah.
Yeah, it can be. It's all about that. It's all about composing the shots. As a director, right, you kind of have like loads of jobs, you wear loads of hats, especially when making low budget stuff. You have to make sure the shot is composed well, no matter what the DOP says to you. You have to make sure the actors are performing the way you want them to perform. You have to make sure that you visually tell people what subconsciously to push them emotionally into the film. As I said, I've met loads of directors today, especially loads of kids. I call them kids, who basically, we point the camera here. That shot's really nice, isn't it? And I'm like, wow. Do you know what I mean? Because they don't know old school directing, like one-ers. Spielberg does wonderful one-ers. You think he's done 6 shots, but he hasn't. It's all done in one shot. Do you know what I mean? And stuff like that. And you know, Lawrence of Arabia is one of the best films ever made. It really, truly is. When you look at that film, I remember watching it when I was 13 and thinking it was boring. then when you get older, when you're in your 20s and your 30s, and you watch and you think, this is a masterpiece. Another film my dad said to me, I remember I loved Star Wars. My dad said to me, watch 12 Angry Men. I was like, no, Dad, Star Wars, mate, Star Wars. And then only 4 years ago, I watched 12 Angry Men. Oh my God, what a masterpiece. What a freaking masterpiece. Casablanca's the same. My dad goes, you should watch Casablanca. I'm like, Dad, Star Wars, mate. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I watched Casablanca, which was 12 Christmases ago. And I literally fell in love with it. And I think it's just amazing. The photography, the wonders that they do in that shot, the actual economy in dialogue and in editing to actually push the story along. It's just freaking amazing, you know? So that to me is directing, you know, it's more than just having a story. It's the way it's told. It's the way you push the actors in a certain way. Sometimes you have to trick actors to push them in a way that, you know, the way that you want them to. Do you know what I mean? If you can understand what I'm saying, then
yeah. So yeah, I understand what you're saying, and I think it's the skill is to make the audience feel a certain way, and it's not easy, especially like you say when you've got 1,000 hats on and you're kind of trying to. Because I often. My wife produces, but I'm kind of produce as well. So we're often juggling lots of other problems, and it's really hard to spend that time focused on what your actual job is. What I was going to ask you about, which you just started to mention there, was directing actors. So what would you, if you were talking to somebody who's about to go off and do their first film, what would you say to them? What advice would you give them about how to direct actors?
I don't know. Look, I've directed a lot of actors that are not. I've directed famous actors, and I've directed a lot of actors that are just starting and stuff like. The only thing I could say to them, right, because basically they should come with their box of tricks, right? Basically, what I'd say to them is, look, less is more. Less is always more, especially if they just started. They want to be big, they want to be noticed and stuff like that. I always say to them, less is more. And to be as natural as possible when you're performing, because subconsciously the punters can tell when you're trying to put on a performance. I always say to them, watch other actors, the actors that you admire the most, and try and see how they do it. You know what I mean? That's the advice I would always give actors. And the way I direct actors is basically, once I know that they've got it, I just let them go. Because, right, everybody thinks that you can, as a director, you control the set. That is bollocks. You don't control the set. What you do is, right, you navigate. So something happens here, you have to figure out how to do it there. If it moves that way, you have to either go with it or try and manipulate it to go one way. Do you know what I mean? There is no way you have control over what you're trying to do. All you can do is get people together when actors perform, and if it's not right, and you tell them time and time again, and still it's not right, you have to trick them into performing in such a way. I'll give you an example. What was an example of that? Oh God, I did something really awful. I got hired to direct this horror film. I don't know whether I should say this story actually. I'll tell it. Fuck it. So I was directing this horror film with Michael Ironside and Jeff Fahey. It was called Fallen Angels, and we had a lot of actors that were, you know, starting out, whatever. And there was this one girl in it where she had to cry in the scene. So, and she couldn't because she was a model, and they hired her because of her looks. And so I learned this technique from Freaking, William Freaking. And so I tried it on her, and I said, so what you do is you make them unnerved. So basically they do the scene and you go, right, cut. And then you tell the crew, like, stop, everybody stop, just don't move, don't say anything. So there's a little quiet on the set, and then I go, we're going to go again. So you do that. And I went, because it was, the budget was quite healthy and it wasn't my production. We went, I think it was 6 takes. And then on the last take, I did the same thing. I said, everybody quiet, whatever. And I walked up to her and I said, you're embarrassing me, in her ear. And I walked off. And then when we rolled, she started crying. And so basically that was a bit mean. But it worked, and she cried. And I remember she wouldn't talk to me, you know, throughout the whole of that shoot. And then we had a screening, and then she saw it. And then while I was in the bar, she came up to me and she said, "Thank you." And I said, "What are you thanking me for?" She goes, "For making me cry, because that scene really does work." And I said, "Well, I'm sorry I did that, but I was at my wit's end. You had to cry, otherwise the scene wouldn't work."
Yeah.
But see, that's an example of being mean and how to manipulate. That's one example of how to manipulate an actor to make them do what you want them to do. I'll never do that again, though.
No, ideally, you'd want to be in a situation where they would trust you enough that they would not cotton on to what you're doing, but kind of feed off of it. And especially like I did a film before where there were two characters who are very combative, horror movie. So it's four women trapped in this kind of prison environment, and there's two characters who don't. Well, there's actually one character who's got a real chip on her shoulder. And I did say to the actress before the shoot, I was like, I don't really want you buddy with the other girls. I want you to keep yourself separate. Carry a little bit of that chip with you for the whole of the shoot, because I think you can tell. Do you know what I mean? If that you can tell that because she did that, and because she did that, she sort of kept her distance from them. There was a little bit more sort of electric energy when we actually did the takes, that they did feel like she was kind of separate from them. So there are little tweaks you can do to help your actors with their performance. So talk to me about Rebecca Gold. So this is the thing that you're working on at the moment. What is it, and how did that come about?
So Rebecca Gold started off as a web series because at that moment in time, I'd made feature films, and I've been hired to make feature films, but I've never been part of the film industry at all for various reasons. I've always been in the independent sector, which is crap, basically, because you don't see a lot of money. And so basically I was not doing anything, and all I was doing was shooting corporate videos and stuff. And I went to lunch with my friend Katie, and she was moaning. She's an actress. She was moaning about she doesn't get parts, whatever. So I said, I've got an idea that I've been floating around. I'll write something for you. So I wrote this thing called Rebecca Gold. And basically it's about an assassin who bumps into a high school crush. Basically, that's what it's about, and how she has to protect her because she basically kind of steps into one of her jobs. So we wrote that, and at the time, web series was the thing to do as a filmmaker, and there was nothing else better to do than to make a web series. So I shot this thing. We shot it really fast, actually. We shot it over, I think, 7 weekends, and when we stuck it, it was like 5 minutes episode. Each episode was 5 minutes, and when we stuck it all together, it's 37 minutes basically. So we shot that. And I was really surprised because we put it in the festival route, and it won like tons of awards. Really, kind of like, decimated the award, the festival route, which I was really surprised. And so I said to the cast, I said, they said, "Oh, when are we going to do season 2?" And I'm like, I don't know. So basically, it took me a year to write season 2, but everybody moves on, don't they? And everything changes. So when I wrote season 2, I came back to them. I said, "Do you want to do that?" And they said yes. But then the main star who played the main character, she dropped out for various reasons, and then she became pregnant, and then I couldn't go back. So I had to kind of recast. And it was really hard to recast, and so I did that. So, but the thing is, though, I wanted to do season 2 because I thought I wrote a really good script, and it is quite good actually, and I just want to work. I'm tired of waiting for people to give me money. I'm just tired of the distributors that rip you off, because my film Bad Day got ripped off, and I haven't seen a penny, and it's on Netflix, and I'm kind of pissed off, but I'm glad it's on Netflix because my film's on Netflix and Tubi and Hulu and Apple and stuff like that. So I haven't got any money to fight them, and so you either do one or two things. You either, carry on with life and, watch films and whatever, or you can start doing, get busy living or get busy dying. So I decided to get busy living. So I decided to make this. But the thing is, though, when I started writing it, you know how they say to you, when you write a low budget film, use what you got, use your house, use your parents. I went, fuck that. I'm not going to do that. I've done that so many times. So I just wrote this and wrote it the way I wanted to write it. And then I figured I'm going to figure it out.
Mm.
So basically, I had this idea where what I'll do is I'll shoot, when I have the money, I'll shoot bits of it, and it's taken me 3 years to complete it. And I've got one scene to do and it's done. And it's taken me 3 years to get to this point. And it's an hour and 37 minutes. That's what we shot. But it was very difficult because the new actress that I hired looks nothing like the old actress.
Right.
So I said to her, I remember I met her because I did this other horror film. It was awful. I didn't even want to talk about it, but I met her on this horrible, they hired me to direct this film. It was awful. The script was terrible and whatever. Anyway, that's another story. So I said to this actress, look, I want to shoot this and it's going to take a long time. Okay. What I can promise you is that I will not allow you to lose a job while you're doing this. If I set everything up and you say to me, you've got a job, I will dismantle everything. You go and I will not take you away from making money. I promise you that. And I said to her, look, it's going to take a long time. You're going to sign a contract where I can use your image and stuff. That's standard. But we won't sign a contract together. I will have faith in humanity that you will complete this with me, that you will be just as enthusiastic as me to do this. And she said, okay. And I thought, fuck, she ain't going to stick with it. And she did, though. She did. And she's an amazing actress. And so it's taken us 3 years, shooting twice a month in the first year, shooting twice halfway through the year, twice a month in the second year. It's running out of money. Then we're shooting once a month. Coming up to this year, we're shooting once a month. And it's almost done. And when I look back at it, I think, Jesus Christ, we achieved that. It's amazing what we did, So my advice to other filmmakers out there is if you want to make something, seriously, don't let anything stand in your way. And also, right, I was totally convinced I was going to fail at this. I was totally convinced it was going to stop halfway. People were going to leave, or they were going to grow beards, or someone was going to go bald halfway through, and do you know what I mean? Stuff like that. But it didn't happen. And I'm really surprised how far I've gone with this. And so, as I say, if people want to make films, the only problem that's stopping you is money. Right. If you can figure that out, then you can make stuff. And you've got to be practical as well. You've got to use your common sense as well. We had loads of problems shooting this, but, we've achieved it. So nobody can take that away from it. And also, all I want to do is create a body of work now. I can't be asked trying to get into the industry anymore. I'm a man of age and I just can't be asked anymore. I'm just going to try and create a body of work and try and sell it. And, if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, because a lot of people, right, they beat themselves up, don't they, about not part of Hollywood, not part of the UK industry. Do you know what I mean? And I've come to the point where I'm like Sodom. Do you know what I mean? All I want to do is create and write and make stuff, and that's what I'm doing.
Yeah. And to be fair, the way the industry kind of dips and wanes anyway. So I know a lot of people who are in that industry are suffering at the moment. And if you've got the power, like you say, to go out there and make something, then it's definitely worth doing it. I'd say to your point about yes, I would always urge a filmmaker to use what you have. So if you've got access to houses and all this stuff, but there is some power in saying, right, this scene's going to be set in a, I've done it myself, medieval village. We're going to set this one in, and then you just worry about that when you get to it. You sort of worry about it when you get to it.
Exactly.
And something, maybe it won't be a medieval village, maybe it'll be an old house or something, but you can adapt things. But if you have those aspirations, you'd be amazed what you can get hold of, or what you can find, all around you to make that work. I hope that was useful for you. If you want to listen to another episode that's really inspiring with a filmmaker who's got a lot of energy, I'd suggest you check out my episode with Jason Park. He's made a bunch of movies that have all gone on to Tubi and other platforms using Film Hub, and he's a bit of a master of that and gives you some great insights on how to use that platform to get your film out as wide as possible. See you on the next one.